Out!
I told you he was not welcome under my roof. Rupert Holloway's voice cut across the ballroom like a knife. 250 guests went quiet. Dad, he is my husband. Your husband? A grease monkey from Pritchard, Alabama, with somebody else's child clinging to his leg. A welfare case with dirt under his fingernails. You threw away every single thing I built for this. Cecily stood still next to Terrence. Mr. Holloway, lower your voice. You do not belong in this room. Trash in a borrowed suit. Cecily's hands shook. She did not look away. Get him out of my house. Rupert pointed at the tall front doors. Cecily, you walk out with him. You walk out for good. No trust, no name, no inheritance, nothing. Terrence took Cecily's hand. Then I have no daughter, but no one inside that mansion knew. A long line of motorcycles had just turned off the county road and was rolling slowly and steadily toward the front gate, and every single thing Rupert Holloway had spent the last 40 years building was about to come down on top of his own head. 6 hours before the charity gala, Cecily Holloway Booker clocked out from a 10-hour shift at Beaumont Children's Hospital. The pediatric wing smelled like floor cleaner and grape juice. Fluorescent lights buzzed above the scratched tile floor. A little girl with leukemia had finally fallen asleep around 3 in the morning, and Cecily had been the one sitting in the chair next to her bed, holding her tiny hand the whole time. That was the work. Not fancy, not high-paying, but completely her own. She walked out to the staff parking lot in flat shoes and a wrinkled cardigan. Her old blue Toyota sat between two newer cars, a long scratch down the driver's side door she kept meaning to get fixed. She tossed her bag in the back and rested her forehead against the steering wheel for a long moment. The engine ticked in the warm Texas air. Her phone buzzed in her lap. It was Terrence. Hey baby, I need to tell you something. She already knew that careful tone. He only used it when her father was in the picture. He called you, didn't he? A long pause. Then Terrence said it. He told me that if I show up tonight, he will make me look like a fool in front of every important person in the state of Texas. Cecily let out a slow breath. She had met Rupert Holloway exactly 4 times. The first time, he looked right through her like she was a stranger she had never spoken about Terrence. The second time, he told her right in front of Terrence that this little phase would pass. The third time, he sent a check to their house for $75,000 with a typed note that said, "For your trouble. Please move on quietly and take the kid back to Alabama." She never cashed it. She kept that note in the drawer of her nightstand as a reminder of exactly who her father really was. The fourth time was the worst, but she did not even want to think about that one right now. Terrence, it is fine. I will stay home tonight. We can put Calvin to bed early and watch something on the couch. No, his voice got harder. You are my wife. You have every right to walk into that ballroom tonight with your head up high. My father does not see it that way. Your father does not see a lot of things. That is his problem, baby, not ours. Cecily stared through the windshield. A drawing Calvin had made for her was taped to the sun visor, a stick figure family holding hands under a giant yellow sun. 3 figures, her, Terrence and Calvin. Josephine Greer, her oldest friend from college, was already at the house watching Calvin for the night. Terrence, I really do not want to start a war. You never start anything. He starts it every single time. A pause on the line. I bought you a dress. It is laid out on the bed. Please come with me tonight, Cecily. Please. She drove home through the warm Texas evening. The sun was sinking low and orange over the rooftops. She thought about the first time she had ever laid eyes on Terrence Booker. It was 3 years ago. She had been visiting a sick aunt in Mobile, Alabama, and her old Toyota had broken down on the highway just outside of Pritchard. She had managed to get the car towed to a small one-bay shop on the edge of town. The sign over the door just said Booker Auto and Cycle. Inside the shop, a tall man in grease-stained coveralls was bent over an engine. There had been a little boy sitting on an overturned milk crate in the corner of the shop. The boy was maybe 5 years old, and he was working on his math homework with a yellow pencil. Cecily had watched Terrence stop work 3 different times to walk over and help that little boy with a problem he was stuck on. Each time, Terrence had crouched down to the boy's eye level. Each time, he had been patient and kind. That was the moment Cecily had known. Before she even knew his name, she found the emerald green dress laid out neatly on the bed. Long sleeves, modest neckline. Simple. It fit her like it had been sewn just for her. She stood in front of the mirror in their small rented house on the edge of town. Around her wrist sat a thin braided leather band with a small worn metal tag. The tag had 2 letters scratched into it, WB. She turned the tag against her wrist so it sat hidden under the sleeve of her dress. Terrence had given her this band on the morning they got married at the courthouse. He never took his off, not in the shower, not in his sleep, not for any reason. Terrence Booker did not talk about his father. When people asked, he said his daddy was retired and lived up north and they did not see eye to eye. That was technically true. What he did not say was that his father, Wendell Booker, was a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran who had come home from 2 tours with a chest full of medals and built one of the largest steel and motorcycle parts manufacturing companies in the entire Southeast. Booker Heavy Industries, 3 plants, 1,200 employees, 40 years of contracts with every major construction and real estate firm from Texas to the Carolinas. And on the weekends, Wendell Booker rode at the head of the Iron Saints Veterans Riders, a charity motorcycle brotherhood with nearly 60,000 members across 41 states. Veterans helping veterans, suicide prevention rides, toy runs at Christmas, funeral escorts for fallen soldiers. Wendell had built that with his own 2 hands too, but Terrence had wanted nothing to do with any of it. Not the steel money, not the family name, not the patch on his back. When he was 22 years old, he packed a single bag and moved to Pritchard, Alabama to live near his late mama's people. He took a job at a friend's garage. He learned to rebuild engines with his own 2 hands. He met a quiet girl named Norma who worked at the diner across the street, and they got married in a small church and had a baby boy named Calvin. 2 years later, Norma got sick, pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 7 months. Terrence buried his wife and moved to Beaumont, Texas with his 3-year-old son to start over. He opened a small 1-bay auto and motorcycle repair shop. He worked 12-hour days. He raised that little boy alone for 2 years before he ever even thought about dating again. He had decided a long time ago that he was going to build his own life on his own 2 hands. No shortcuts, no daddy's money, no biker name. Nobody would ever be able to say Terrence Booker had been handed anything in this world. That same afternoon, back at his small Beaumont shop, Terrence had been finishing a brake job for a sweet old woman named Loretta Pemberton. She was 78 years old. She had been bringing her old brown Buick to Terrence's shop for almost 2 years. That day she had walked in with her purse clutched in both hands and tears in her eyes, because she knew the brake pads were worn through to the metal, and she knew she could not afford the repair. Terrence had finished the job in 2 hours. When she asked what she owed him, he wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Miss Loretta, this one is in the house. You just promise me you will drive safe and come back next month for your oil change." She had cried in his arms for almost a full minute before she could even speak. That was the kind of man Terrence Booker was. After Loretta drove away, his phone rang. The number was blocked. He had answered it anyway. The voice on the other end was smooth and slow and cold. "Mr. Booker, this is Rupert Holloway. We have not had the pleasure of speaking directly before. I will be brief. My daughter is making the worst mistake of her life. Tonight at my gala, you will not embarrass her further by attending. If you do attend, I will personally make sure every person in that ballroom understands exactly what kind of man you are. Are we clear?" Terrence had not answered. He had just hung up the phone and stood in the empty shop for a long time, looking at the wall. Then he called his wife. By 6 in the evening, Terrence had picked up Calvin from his after-school program. The little boy was now 8 years old. He was smart and polite and tender-hearted, with his late mama's deep brown eyes and his daddy's strong jaw. In the truck on the way home, Calvin had been quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Daddy, why don't we ever go see Grandpa Wendell anymore?" Terrence had gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "Buddy, grown-up things are complicated sometimes. Me and your grandpa had a big argument a long time ago, and neither one of us was really good at saying we were sorry." Calvin had thought about that for a long time. Then he said, "But Daddy, you tell me sorry is always the right thing to say, even when it is hard." Terrence had not been able to answer that one. When they got home, Calvin had drawn his daddy a small picture, a motorcycle with a man and a little boy riding on it. He had given it to Terrence and said, "For good luck tonight, Daddy." Josephine arrived at 7:30. Cecily kissed Calvin's forehead and told him to mind Miss Josephine and brush his teeth before bed. Terrence came out of the bedroom in a borrowed black suit that did not quite fit perfectly across his shoulders. The jacket was a little too tight in the chest. The pants were a half-inch too long. Cecily smoothed his collar with both hands and smiled up at him. "You look so handsome." He took her hand and they walked out to his old work truck because her Toyota was still in the shop. At a red light a few miles from the Holloway estate, Terrence reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens tonight, baby, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Cecily touched the leather band on her wrist. The metal tag pressed gently against her skin under the silk sleeve. The iron gates of the Holloway estate were already swung open. A long line of luxury cars curved up the driveway. Valets in red vests took the keys. When the valet saw Terrence's old work truck pull up, his face did not change, but his eyes flicked just for a second to the dented bumper and the small Booker Auto and Cycle decal in the back window. Terrence handed him the keys and walked around to open the passenger door for his wife. The foyer of the Holloway mansion was the size of a small church. Italian marble in 3 different colors, a staircase that curved like a swan's neck up to the second floor, a chandelier with what must have been 1,000 pieces of crystal, the smell of expensive perfume and lemon oil and old money. A waiter with a tray of champagne walked right past Terrence and Cecily without offering them a glass, pretended not to see them. Cecily took Terrence's arm a little tighter. The ballroom was even worse. 250 of the wealthiest people in Southeast Texas filled the space, pearls on every neck, diamonds on every finger, tuxedos and silk gowns. A jazz trio played soft music near the marble staircase, white rose centerpieces on every table, crystal chandeliers throwing warm gold light across everything. Terrence in his slightly too small black suit, Cecily in her emerald green dress. The first whispers started before they had taken 3 steps into the room. A woman in a champagne-colored gown leaned over to her husband and said something behind her hand. 2 men by the bar glanced over and then looked away. Nadine Holloway, Cecily's mother, was standing near the staircase in a silver gown. When she spotted them, the color drained from her face. Rupert Holloway was on his 4th scotch of the night. He had been holding court near the bar, telling a story to a state senator named Festus Whitley and an oil tycoon named Obadiah Lance. He was laughing. His laugh died in his throat the moment he saw the green dress in the doorway. He set his glass down on the bar with a sharp click. Nadine reached for his sleeve. "Rupert, not here. Not tonight." He was already moving. His shoes clicked across the marble floor like a slow countdown. The string trio noticed and faltered. Then they stopped playing entirely. The last note hung in the air and died. 250 heads turned. Rupert stopped 6 feet in front of his daughter and his son-in-law. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The room had already gone silent for him. "I told you he was not welcome under my roof." That was the line that started everything. The line that opened the wound. Cecily lifted her chin. She had practiced this answer in the car on the drive over. "Dad, he is my husband. We have been married for 14 months. You knew he was coming with me tonight. I told you a week ago." Rupert's lip curled. "Your husband?" A grease monkey from Pritchard, Alabama, with somebody else's child clinging to his leg. A welfare case with dirt under his fingernails. He took 1 slow step closer. "You threw away every single thing I built for this. You threw away Holloway Development. You threw away your name. You threw it all away for what? For him?" He gestured at Terrence without even looking at him. Cecily stood very still. "You threw away every single thing I built for this." She said it back to him. She let the words hang there. "I built a life, Daddy. I built a marriage. I built a family. You are the one trying to throw it away, not me." Rupert turned to Terrence for the first time. He looked him up and down slowly, the way a man inspects something he is about to throw in the garbage. "Mr. Booker, lower your voice. You do not belong in this room." Trash in a borrowed suit. Terrence had not said 1 word yet. But Rupert was not finished. "How much did the suit cost? Because I know you did not pay for it. Not on what you make at a 1-bay garage in the worst part of town. Tell me, did my daughter buy you that suit, the same way she has been buying you everything else?" A few of the guests near the back let out short, ugly little laughs. The kind of laughs people make when they are nervous and cruel at the same time. The sound bounced off the marble walls and landed on Terrence like thrown rocks. Cecily's hands started to shake at her sides. Terrence felt the tremor in her arm and stepped forward just a little, putting his body between his wife and her father. Still, he did not speak. Rupert turned and addressed the entire ballroom. He raised his voice now. He wanted every single person there to hear every single word. "Friends, honored guests, I owe all of you an apology. My daughter has chosen to bring an uninvited guest to our gala tonight, a man I had specifically asked her not to bring, a man who is not, and never will be, a part of this family." He took a sip of scotch. He let the silence stretch. My daughter Cecily, who I sent to the finest schools in this country, who I raised to understand the value of the Holloway name, has decided to throw away 3 generations of legacy for a grease monkey from Alabama with another woman's child on his hip. He shook his head. I want every person in this room to see the kind of judgment my daughter has demonstrated tonight. The words hit the ballroom like a slap across the face. 250 people stared at their shoes. A woman in a black gown covered her mouth with a gloved hand. A senator pulled out his phone and pretended to read something very important. A waiter froze mid-step, the champagne on his tray trembling. Not one person stepped forward. Not one person opened their mouth. $300 million worth of guests in that ballroom and not a single spine among them. Rupert reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a thick cream-colored document, heavy paper. 40 pages. He held it up between 2 fingers like a verdict that had already been decided. Since my daughter cannot seem to take a hint, let me make this official. He walked to the nearest cocktail table and set the document down on the white linen tablecloth. A sweating champagne flute sat next to it. Postnuptial agreement. My attorneys drafted it this morning. 40 pages. It states that you, Cecily Marie Holloway, will sign away all claims to Holloway Development, to the trust, to every property, every account, every dollar this family has ever earned. He tapped the cover with 1 finger. The child, the kid from somebody else's bed. He gets nothing. Now or ever. His name is Calvin. Cecily's voice was quiet, but it carried. His name is Calvin Wendell Booker. He is 8 years old. Rupert did not even look at her. The agreement also states that you will be required to divorce Mr. Booker within 12 months, at which point your inheritance and trust access will be fully restored. Until then, you will be permitted to attend Holloway family functions only with my prior written approval. He looked up at her. Sign it tonight in front of these witnesses, and we forget this ever happened. Cecily looked at the document. She did not touch it. Her hands had stopped shaking. Something inside her had gone very still and very sharp. Rupert took 1 more step closer. The bourbon was thick on his breath. He spoke low now, just for her, but every person in the front row could hear. I want you to listen very carefully, sweetheart. 3 things. 1, your nursing school loan. The $86,000 loan you took out through the Holloway Family Foundation when you turned 21. I own that loan. 1 phone call from me, and the entire balance is due in full by close of business tomorrow morning. 2, your husband's repair shop. The commercial lease on that building, the shell company that holds it, is owned by Holloway Development. 1 phone call and his lease is terminated for cause. 30 days notice. 3, the little boy's private school scholarship. The Beaumont Academy scholarship he received last year, funded entirely by a Holloway Foundation grant. 1 phone call and that scholarship disappears. He smiled then. A small, tight, cruel smile. I have had you boxed in for almost 2 years, Cecily, and you never even knew it. Cecily felt her stomach drop. She felt the floor shift under her feet. For 1 terrible second, she felt the old fear come back. The fear of being a little girl in this big cold house. The fear of saying the wrong thing at the dinner table, the fear of her father. Then she felt Terrence's hand on the small of her back. Steady, warm, right where it had always been, and the fear went away. She lifted her chin. She looked her father in the eye. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. I graduated top 5% of my class at Texas Christian University. I have been a pediatric oncology nurse for 7 years. I work 60 hours a week. I have saved the lives of more children than every person in this room combined. I have never asked you for 1 single dime since I was 18 years old, and I did not come here tonight to be torn apart in front of strangers. Rupert smiled, and yet here you are being torn apart in front of strangers. A few of the guests near the back laughed again. Short, nervous laughs. But laughs. That was when Terrence spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet and steady, and it carried to every corner of the ballroom. Mr. Holloway. Sir. Rupert turned to him slowly, surprised the grease monkey could speak in complete sentences. You can say whatever you want about me. I have been called worse by better men. I do not care what you call me. I do not care what these people in this room think about my suit or my truck or the dirt under my fingernails. Terrence took 1 step forward. But you will not stand in front of 250 people and call my son trash. You will not stand in this room and call him the kid from somebody else's bed. His name is Calvin Wendell Booker. He is 8 years old. He lost his mama when he was 3, he says. Please and thank you. He helps the lunch lady wipe down the tables at school. He reads to the kindergartners on Fridays. He is the best human being I have ever known in my entire life. Terrence's voice did not rise, but every word landed like a hammer. And you have known he existed for 2 years, and you have never once even bothered to learn his name. The room went silent. Even the guests who had been laughing stopped. The cruel little chuckles died in their throats. A woman in the front row dropped her hand from her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. She did not even know why. Terrence reached out and picked up the 40-page document from the cocktail table. He held it up so the room could see it. Then he tore it cleanly in half. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest thing in the room. He set both halves back on the table. We will not be signing this tonight, or any night. Rupert's face went red. The vein at his temple started to pulse. Security. His voice cracked when he said it. He cleared his throat and said it louder. Security. 2 big men in black suits appeared at the doors of the ballroom, arms folded, faces blank, built like brick walls in tailored jackets. Mrs. Booker is no longer a member of this family, effective immediately, removed from the trust, cut off from every account in her name. Her vehicle, which is registered to Holloway Development, will be repossessed by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Her foundation loan is being called in tonight. Her name will be removed from the family will before the sun comes up. He spun in a full circle so every guest could see him. I want every person in this room to bear witness. I have no daughter. From this moment forward, I have no daughter. Cecily turned slowly to look at her mother. Nadine was standing by the staircase, both hands gripping her champagne flute like a life preserver. Cecily looked at her with everything she had, every memory of being a little girl crying in the upstairs bathroom, every memory of being a teenager hiding bruised feelings under perfect dresses, every memory of asking her mother to please, just one time, stand up for her. She begged her mother with her eyes. "Mama, please, just one time, just say something. Anything." Nadine looked back at her. For 1/2 of a second, something flickered across the older woman's face. Then it was gone. The mask slid back into place. Nadine turned her head away. She actually turned her body away. She faced the staircase. Cicely's heart broke for the second time that night. The first break had been a sharp, loud crack. This one was a slow, soft tear, like fabric giving way. Terrence took her hand. His fingers laced through hers and held on tight. "Baby, let's go home." She nodded. She could not speak. Together they started walking toward the heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom. 250 guests parted to let them through. Not one person said a word. Not one person reached out. Not one person stepped forward to stand with them. As they passed near the bar, a young waiter named Melvin, no more than 20 years old in a white server's jacket, locked eyes with Terrence for a half-second and gave him the smallest, briefest nod. So small that nobody else even saw it. That was the only act of decency in the entire room. 10 steps from the doors, Rupert called out one more time. His voice was loud and ugly. "You will be back. When the money runs out and you're sleeping in that grease monkey's truck and that little bastard child is hungry, you will come crawling back to me." They always do. Terrence did not turn around. Cecily did not turn around. They walked through the heavy oak doors and out into the foyer. The doors swung shut behind them. The foyer was cool and quiet after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. Cecily took 3 steps and then her knees gave out. Terrence caught her around the waist. He pulled her in against his chest and held her there. She did not cry. She just shook. Her whole body shook. He stroked her hair with one rough hand. "I am so sorry, baby. I am so sorry. I should have made you stay home tonight." She shook her head against his shirt. No, you were right. I had to stand up to him. He has held this whole thing over my head for my entire life. Tonight it ends. Tonight I am free." She pulled back. She looked up at her husband. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then she reached down and gently lifted the leather band on his wrist. She turned the small metal tag with the WB scratched into it so it was facing up. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked up at Terrence. "Terrence, it is time. Call him." Terrence stared at her. He had not spoken to his father in almost 3 years, 34 months. Not since the fight after his mama's funeral. Not since the angry words about pride and stubbornness and what a son owes his father. He had been too proud to call first. Wendell had been too proud to call first. The silence between them had grown so big that neither one of them knew how to cross it anymore. "Cecily, I have not. I do not even know if he will." "He will. He is your daddy." Call him. Terrence walked out through the front doors onto the wide stone portico. The Texas night was warm and still. Crickets were singing somewhere in the manicured gardens. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking now. He scrolled down to a contact he had not opened in almost 3 years. The name just said Daddy. He pressed the green button. It rang twice. A deep, slow voice answered. Son. Terrence could not speak for a moment. His throat closed up. He pressed his fist against his mouth. Then he managed to get the words out. Daddy, I need you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Wendell Booker spoke again, his voice was thick. I know, son, I am already on the road. I have been since 6 o'clock this evening. I will be at the front gate of that mansion in 9 minutes. Terrence almost dropped the phone. Daddy, how? How did you? Your boy called me about 4 hours ago. From your friend Josephine's phone. Earlier that evening, while Cecily had been in the bedroom getting ready, and Terrence had been in the shower, little Calvin had quietly asked Miss Josephine if he could borrow her phone for just a minute. He had told her it was important. She had handed it to him. Calvin had walked into the kitchen and dialed a number he had memorized 2 years ago. The number for his grandpa Wendell up in Tennessee. When the old man picked up, the little boy had whispered into the phone. Grandpa, it is me, Calvin. My daddy and my mama are going to a big rich party tonight, and the mean grandpa is going to be there, and my daddy is real nervous. Grandpa, I'm scared he is going to get hurt. Wendell had been quiet for a long moment. Then he had said, Sweet boy, where is this party? Calvin had given him the address. He had heard his daddy and mama talking about it at dinner the night before. Wendell had said, You did good, son. You did real good. Now you go give your mama a hug, and you do not say a word about this phone call. Grandpa is going to take care of everything. Wendell had hung up the phone. He had walked into his garage. He had put on his Iron Saints vest, the one with the 3 stars on the chest and the founder's patch on the back. Then he had made exactly one phone call to his road captain, a man named Clarence Whitfield. By 6:15 that evening, the word had gone out. By 6:45, 112 veteran riders from 3 states had kicked their bikes to life. By the time Terrence dialed his father's number from the front portico of the Holloway estate, the Iron Saints veterans riders were 8 miles down the highway and closing fast. Terrence walked back into the foyer. Cecily was sitting on the bottom step of the curved marble staircase. He sat down beside her. He took her hand. He is coming. He is almost here. They sat together in the silence of that foyer, and they waited. At first they heard nothing, just the crickets and the soft hum of the chandelier above them. Then they heard it, a low rumble, far away at first, like distant thunder. The rumble grew. It grew louder and deeper. Cecily lifted her head. Terrence stood up and walked to the tall front windows that overlooked the long driveway. Cecily came and stood beside him. Through the iron gates at the far end of the property they saw them, a river of headlights coming up the country road, 2 by 2, stretching back as far as they could see in the warm Texas night. Inside the ballroom, the guests heard it too. The chandeliers had started to vibrate. The crystal pieces tinkled softly against each other. The jazz trio stopped playing for the second time that night. 250 wealthy guests looked up at the ceiling, then at each other, then at the windows. Rupert Holloway, who had just been pouring himself another scotch at the bar, set the bottle down slowly. The rumble was right outside now. The whole mansion was shaking with it. Out at the front gate, the lead rider dismounted from his bike. He was a tall, older black man with a neat silver beard. The Holloway security guard, a stocky man named Dwight, walked up to the gate with his hand on his radio. He started to refuse them entry. The lead rider, Clarence Whitfield, just held up his phone with a slight smile. Son, there is a man on the other end of this line who needs to speak with you for a moment. Dwight took the phone. Whoever was on the other end made the security guard go very pale very fast. He handed the phone back. He turned around and opened the gate. 112 motorcycles rolled slowly up the long driveway. The engines were not loud. They did not need to be. There were just so many of them. They formed a wide horseshoe shape in front of the mansion steps. The lead rider, a man on a black and chrome Harley, dismounted last. He pulled off his helmet, silver hair close cropped. A neat silver beard, 66 years old, 6'4", shoulders like a bull. He was wearing a black leather vest over a clean white button-down shirt. On the front of the vest, 3 stars and a small embroidered American flag. On the back, the Iron Saints emblem in red and gold thread. He walked up the wide marble steps of the Holloway mansion slowly and deliberately. Terence opened the front door. Father and son stood looking at each other for a long moment. Then Wendell Booker stepped forward and pulled his only son into a hard, long hug. Neither one of them spoke. Wendell's big, rough hand cupped the back of Terence's head. Terence's shoulders shook just once. 3 years of silence broke right there on those marble steps. After a long moment, Wendell pulled back. He looked over his son's shoulder at Cecily, who was standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. He stepped forward and gently cupped her face with one big, rough hand. "Daughter, are you all right?" Cecily nodded. She tried to speak. She could not. Wendell looked toward the heavy oak doors of the ballroom. The rumble of the engines outside was still audible through the walls of the mansion. He said quietly, "Son, show me the man." Terence pushed open the heavy oak doors. Wendell Booker walked in first. Behind him, 12 of his road captains followed in their leather vests. Clarence Whitfield, a Vietnam veteran named Calvin Reeves, a Gulf War veteran named Bertie Holloway, no relation, a young Iraq veteran named Lavelle Cruz, 12 men with combined service time of over 200 years. The richest guests in Southeast Texas turned to stare. The crowd parted without anyone having to ask. Some of the older men in the room, men who had themselves served in uniform, recognized the 3 stars on Wendell's chest. A retired Air Force colonel in a tuxedo straightened up. A former Army major set down his glass. Rupert Holloway turned away from the bar. He saw the leather vests and the silver beard and the work boots on his Italian marble floor, and he laughed. A short, ugly laugh. He raised his voice for the room. "Oh, this is wonderful. Just wonderful. The grease monkey brought his biker gang to my charity gala. This evening just keeps getting better and better." Wendell did not respond right away. He walked the length of the ballroom slowly. He stopped 6 feet in front of Rupert Holloway. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and quiet, and every person in that ballroom heard every word. "Mr. Holloway, we have met before twice." Rupert blinked. The smug smile started to fade just slightly. "Once at the Texas governor's prayer breakfast 4 years ago, you stood in line for 22 minutes that morning to shake my hand and ask my company to bid on the structural steel for your new 58-story development in Houston." Wendell paused. "And once at the Veterans Memorial fundraiser in Dallas 2 years ago, you bought a $1,000 plate at that dinner. You tried very hard at that dinner to convince me to sit on your charity board." Another long pause. "You also tried to sell me a piece of beachfront property in Galveston that I later learned you did not actually own." Rupert's mouth was open now. The smile was completely gone. His brain was working very hard and very fast. The silver beard, the 3 stars, the Iron Saints emblem, the fact that this man had just walked into his ballroom with 112 veteran riders parked on his front lawn. His eyes went wide. Wendell Booker." Wendell nodded slowly. "Mr. Holloway, the grease monkey you have been insulting for the last 43 minutes in front of 250 witnesses is my only son." The ripple went through the ballroom like a wave. The richest guests started putting it together in real time. Somebody near the bar whispered the words Booker Heavy Industries. Somebody else whispered Iron Saints. Obadiah Lance, the oil tycoon who had been laughing at Rupert's first joke earlier in the evening, set his bourbon down on the bar with a soft, careful click. He took 2 slow steps backward. Distance was being created. The state senator, Festus Whitley, pretended to need to check on his wife and started moving across the room. A woman in a sapphire necklace covered her mouth. Wendell continued. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "Booker Heavy Industries supplies the structural steel for 63% of Holloway Development's current and projected construction projects. The contract was signed 4 years ago. It is up for renewal in 11 months. He paused. "I also currently sit on the board of 2 of the 3 banks that hold Holloway Development's outstanding construction loans. The 3rd bank is run by my brother-in-law." He paused again. "I'm not threatening you, Mr. Holloway. I am simply stating the facts as they are." Rupert took an involuntary step backward. He bumped into the bar. He grabbed the edge of it to steady himself. His hands were shaking. He tried to put the smile back on his face. It would not quite fit. "General Booker, Mr. Booker, sir, there has clearly been some terrible misunderstanding here this evening. Family matters and business matters are 2 completely different things. Surely we can step into my study and discuss this privately." He extended his hand. His palm was sweating. Wendell looked at the hand. He did not take it. He let it hang there in the empty air for what felt like a full long minute. Rupert's hand finally dropped back to his side. Wendell spoke again. His voice had gone quieter, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Mr. Holloway, I'm not actually here about the business. The business will sort itself out. The contract will not be renewed next year. The banks will do what banks do. None of that is what I came here for tonight." He took one slow step closer. "I came here for that little boy, Calvin Wendell Booker, my grandson. He is 8 years old. He lost his mama when he was 3 years old. His daddy raised him alone. That little boy is the smartest, gentlest, most tender-hearted soul I have ever known in my 66 years on this earth. He calls me Grandpa. He keeps a picture of me in his school binder. He talks about my motorcycle every single Saturday morning when his daddy takes him to the park." Wendell paused. His jaw worked for a moment. "And you, Mr. Holloway, you have known that boy existed for 2 years now, and you have never once even bothered to learn his name. You called him trash tonight, in front of 250 people, in front of his daddy. You called an 8-year-old child who has lost his mother trash." The silence in the ballroom was so deep it hurt. A woman in the back of the room was crying openly now. The older Air Force colonel had his hand over his eyes. Cecily stepped forward. She walked right past her father like he was not even there. She stood next to her father-in-law and her husband. She looked at Rupert and she spoke clearly and calmly. "Daddy, I do not want your money. I do not want your trust. I do not want your name. You called my son trash tonight, and nobody in my life will ever do that again." She turned and looked across the ballroom at Nadine, who was still standing by the staircase. "Mama, I have spent 31 years of my life waiting for you to stand up for me. Just one time. I do not need it anymore. I have a family. They are standing right here." Something happened then that nobody in that ballroom expected. Nadine Holloway, who had been clutching her champagne flute like a life preserver for the entire evening, slowly set the glass down on the table beside her. She reached up and unclasped the diamond bracelet on her right wrist. The anniversary bracelet, the one Rupert had given her on their 20th wedding anniversary, worth roughly $40,000. She walked across the marble floor in her silver gown. She walked right past her husband without looking at him. She set the bracelet down on the cocktail table next to the torn postnuptial agreement. Then she took her daughter's hand. Her eyes were full of tears. Her voice was breaking. "Baby, I am so sorry. I have been a coward for 41 years. 41 years of biting my tongue. 41 years of looking the other way. I am done. I am so done." Cecily pulled her mother into her arms. Both women cried. Rupert watched it happen. His own wife. The woman he had been married to for 41 years. Walking away from him in front of 250 witnesses, he opened his mouth. No words came out. Wendell looked at him one last time. He spoke quietly. "Mr. Holloway, you are going to have a hard week, a hard month, maybe a hard year. The business will hurt. The lawsuits will come. The newspapers will not be kind to you. But none of that is the worst thing that happened to you tonight. The worst thing is that you had a daughter who loved you, and you had a grandson she was going to introduce you to next month at his birthday party. And you threw them both away, because you could not see past the color of a man's skin or the dirt under his fingernails or the size of his truck. That is a loss, Mr. Holloway. That is a loss no amount of money in this world will ever fix." Then Wendell turned around. He walked out of the ballroom. 12 road captains followed him. Terence followed. Cecily followed, arm in arm with her mother. They walked out through the heavy oak doors. They walked through the marble foyer. They walked out into the warm Texas night, where 112 veteran riders sat waiting on their bikes in a wide horseshoe in front of the mansion. The drive back to Beaumont took just under an hour. Terence and Cecily rode in the back of Wendell's big black pickup truck. Nadine followed in her own car. The 112 motorcycles rode escort the entire way. Cecily fell asleep with her head on Terence's shoulder somewhere on the interstate. The headlights of the Iron Saints stretched out behind them on the dark highway like a river of stars. They got back to the small rented house just before midnight. Josephine had Calvin asleep on the couch under his favorite blue blanket. Wendell walked into the living room very quietly in his big boots. He knelt down beside the couch. He looked at his grandson for the first time in 3 years. The boy had gotten so much bigger. His face had changed. His mama's brown eyes were closed in sleep. Wendell's own eyes filled up. He reached out and gently smoothed the hair back from the boy's forehead. Calvin stirred. He opened his eyes. He blinked a few times in the lamplight. Then he saw the face above him. His small hand came up and touched the 3 stars on the leather vest. "Grandpa Wendell," his voice was sleepy and full of wonder. "You came." Wendell could not speak. He just nodded. Calvin sat up and threw both arms around his grandfather's thick neck. He whispered, "I missed you, Grandpa. I missed you so much." Wendell held that little boy for a long, long time. They sat at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning. Wendell and Terrence, father and son, they drank coffee. They talked. Wendell apologized first. He said he had been too proud at his wife's funeral 3 years ago. He said he had said things he did not mean. Terrence apologized too. He said he had been too stubborn. He said he should have called. They both cried a little bit. They both laughed a little bit. Cecily made breakfast at 3 in the morning because nobody was sleeping anyway. Bacon and eggs and biscuits. Calvin sat on his grandpa's lap the whole time and asked 1,000 questions about the motorcycle and the vest and the 3 stars. 6 months passed. The story spread quickly. A guest at the gala had recorded part of Rupert's tirade on a phone. The audio file leaked online within 48 hours. 3 major Holloway development construction projects lost their financing within a month. 2 oil partners pulled out of a Galveston deal. Booker Heavy Industries quietly chose not to renew its supply contract. A class action discrimination lawsuit filed 2 years earlier by 3 former Holloway employees suddenly found 6 new witnesses willing to testify. The lawsuit settled for $41 million. Rupert was forced to step down as CEO of his own company by a unanimous board vote. His personal net worth dropped from $1.8 billion to roughly $500 million. He moved out of the mansion into a much smaller house up the coast. Nadine filed for divorce 3 months after the gala. The settlement was generous but not extravagant. She bought a modest 2-bedroom house in Beaumont, just 6 blocks from her daughter's place. She started volunteering twice a week at Beaumont Children's Hospital. She became a real grandmother to Calvin. She picked him up from school on Tuesdays. She baked him chocolate chip cookies every Sunday afternoon. She told everyone who asked that she had found her voice at 63 years old, and it had been the best thing she had ever done in her entire life. Terrence's 1-bay repair shop grew into a 3-bay full-service garage within a year. He hired 2 veterans from the Iron Saints. He still fixed Loretta Pemberton's brown Buick for free every 6 months. Cecily was promoted to head pediatric oncology nurse at the hospital. Calvin started riding behind his grandpa on the back of Wendell's black and chrome Harley every Saturday morning. Wendell had a small leather vest made just for the boy. 3 little stars on the front, the Iron Saints Junior patch on the back. Calvin wore it everywhere. He even tried to wear it to school. Rupert Holloway sits alone today in a small white house up the Texas coast. No staff, no security team, no charity gala invitations. No phone calls from old friends. The last known photograph of him shows an old man in a wrinkled shirt sitting alone on a front porch, watching the empty road, like he is waiting for somebody. Nobody comes. So here's my question for you. If you had been in that ballroom that night, standing among those 250 wealthy guests, watching Rupert tear into Terrence and Cecily, which one would you have been? Would you have been one of the 249 cowards who stared at their shoes and pretended not to see? Or would you have been the young waiter named Melvin, 20 years old in a borrowed white jacket, who gave the smallest nod across the room because it was the only thing he could safely do? I want you to drop your honest answer in the comments below. I want to know if this story made you feel something tonight. Anger, sadness, hope, maybe a little bit of all 3. If it did, please hit that like button. Share this story with somebody who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet, because more stories like this one are coming every single week. And remember this last thing before you go. And remember, the people who love you for real do not ask you to earn it. They just love you. And that, my friends, is worth more than any inheritance on earth.